So, so from the training standpoint, right? If you want to deliver that sub two, and I don't care how much sub two, 1/10 or just a 2 second build drill,
Mm-hmm.
like where do you spend most of your training time at for that specific exercise?
Me, pick dry fire.
Right. But in terms of metric, like your own training, right? So for me, if I want something, I want to shoot a 2 second build drill, right? I'm not dry firing 2 second build drills.
No.
I'm isolating certain skills that need to be done perfect or near perfect at a much, much faster level to start to combine all those things to get to that end state.
Yeah, I like to, like, for me, it makes sense to run a sub-second perfectly in my vision. It doesn't have to be a perfect dot, but at least seeing red across the specific point of the target I'm looking at in under a second, and I can press the trigger on it. Because after that, if my grip is solid, now I'm just cutting splits, and I'm under 2 seconds. That's where my head goes with it. You guys know far more about it than I do. But that's what I would work on, is getting that first shot with a solid grip and everything correct for the first shot in under a second.
Yeah. So Ben, you were saying you shot primarily classifiers, right? And then once you started understanding, getting comfortable with that, with training that way, just shooting hundos in training wasn't good enough, was it?
Well, no, I wanted to really be near what's possible. And some of them, especially at that time, you could exceed 100. And I wanted to be able to do that. And then, like we were talking about, the consistency mattered a lot. So I was really sensitive to consistency,
Yeah. So doing that, like how much of your training did you spend just pushing?
I wouldn't really say, maybe pushing is not the right word, because with classifiers, you can always break out how long is this going to take, like realistically, to shoot a good score, right? So let's say you're doing El Presidente, you don't plan to shoot all A's on it. You're like, well, realistically, how many points am I dropping on this? How fast does it need to be? What's that going to look like to get the score I want,
Yeah.
So then I would just force myself to shoot a speed that I considered realistic on that classifier. So I wouldn't even really say I was pushing. It was just I was forcing myself to go as fast as it needed to be to get the outcome I wanted. And then I forced myself to figure out how to get the outcome I wanted.
Did you start to see, Ben, and it's because I've heard it from people, I've seen it, I've tried to do it myself, and I've watched it in students. Did you see yourself, once you pushed yourself at the pace for whatever imaginary drill is, the pace is 3.7 seconds. If you pushed yourself at that speed, did you eventually find those points where you're like, I have more time to aim here? Like, I have more time to do these specific things. It was all just one big blur?
No, it wasn't a big blur, but what I learned is that I didn't feel like I had more time. I just got used to working with less. So, like, you have it in your head that you're going to start seeing stuff better as you do it fast, but it's more like you get used to working with just a flash of your sight or just a flash of color from your dot, and you learn to read that and you learn what that means and you start to trust that. And that's what shooting at that speed looks like, as opposed to, you have more time to aim. Like, you have more time if you relax and slow down. You're going to feel like you have all the time in the world, and you'll shoot really consistently, but not super fast.
So am I correct if I were to say this to our guys, like learning to see what a glint of sight is on the target and getting a hit, the more often you see that glint become a hit, you can start to trust it. Like, that's all you needed. That's all you needed to get that hit, was that streak of coming from lower left to upper right. That's it. If you see that, you can press and you know it's an alpha.
Well, you're going to learn what that means, right?
Yeah.
And I agree with that. Trust is really the right word. You learn to trust what you're seeing. Or you'll see guys, especially as you push them, they'll shoot and they'll feel like they had a miss or something, and the feeling will be right, but they can't articulate why they feel that way. People learn to trust that stuff.
Yeah, I think you've got to it's trusting that they can do it, that they can get away with that, but then also and this is a big challenge I have training dudes, is that getting getting comfortable with less information.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing, right? Because you can see cues and what people are doing visually, but then trying to get guys to articulate like, hey, what did you see? Right. And more times than not, from my experience, guys aren't paying attention to what they're seeing. They're like, I don't even fucking know.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, describe to me what the dot looked like when you shot it. Right. Because, if you've got some Charlies in the left and lower left deltas and deltas on the right, and you start to like, hey, when you pulled the trigger, the dot was here because of how this gun works, right? So getting guys to conceptualize that and like tying in visually what they're doing and recognizing it when it's happening. I think that's all benefits of stuff that I get out of dry fire. When you take the recoil away and teaching guys, when guys learn how to objectively assess what's happening while it's happening, they can make much bigger gains rather than going to like a more conventional, like, hey, what does the target tell me just happened approach.
Yeah, it's about reconciling what you think you're seeing with what's actually happening. So you do actually need a bunch of live fire to really figure out what's going on. You have
What
to
you think
connect cause with effect.